Alright, my darlings! Well, we're back for the year, and I think it's time we hit the ground running with a big one. And given that we had a look at Jim Henson's first non-Muppet feature film, feels only fitting that we take a look at the second.
For the record, I'm doing this video under protest.
Yeah, he's just mad because there's something else Jim Henson related he wants us to look at, but we're not doing it. What I say goes around here.
For now.
But enough of this Gallagher brother bullshit, let's get into our first big review of the year with the fantasy cult classic, Labyrinth. Yes, the movie that gave us the song Dance Magic Dance and the various spoofs on that song regarding a certain star's prominence in the film is our target today. But how will it compare to Dark Crystal? Will it be more focused and memorable, or will it just be a pale imitation?
Or it'll just be you dragging your feet on looking at something else related to Dark Crystal.
Huck, be professional here, or I'll send you back to where I found you, shilling for old speckled hen.
At least I got to be tanked while doing those ads, and I could do with getting drunk right about now.
Lay off the milkshakes. But as always, let's go over the history first. After the disappointing reception and box office return of Dark Crystal, Jim Henson decided that he needed to switch things up a bit for his next movie. They were still going to have it fantasy-based with a lot of puppets, of course, but it was felt that there needed to be a bit more of a human element to it, and to have the movie seem more approachable to young audiences. I would say I feel they missed the trick by having the movie be sci-fi related as a real switch up, but considering this came out the same year as this, perhaps they made the right choice. One of the big decisions made was that Henson wasn't going to write the script this time, instead sharing that duty with children's author Dennis Lee and former Monty Python, Terry Jones. While I don't know much about Dennis Lee's work, Terry Jones on the other hand I think was an interesting choice for helping out the story, since he does have an affinity for fantasy. He's written several fantasy books, many of which were in conjunction with Brian Frohn, who worked on both this movie and The Dark Crystal.
And would later go on to make...
Shh! Not now. Terry Jones has also had history with fantasy movies, not only being the co-director of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and being one of the chief creative consultants for its musical adaptation Spamalot, but also worked on other fantasy movies such as The Jabberwocky, and later Eric the Viking and Wind in the Willows. It was also decided to have more recognisable faces that the general public would be attracted to, so they got up-and-coming teen actress Jennifer Connelly, fresh off her success in the movies Phenomena and 7 Minutes in Heaven the previous year, and the Starman himself, David Bowie, playing the villain and also composing the music for the film. While Jim Henson didn't express any frustration at his creative vision being quashed at the time, I could see that it might have been frustrating to have all these studio notes interfere with what he probably wanted to make himself. But how do all these elements come together into the film? Well, let's find out as we watch Labyrinth. We start off with our main character Sarah, played by Connelly, rehearsing a play in the park with her dog.
I have fought my way here to the castle beyond the Goblin City. Take back the child that you have stolen. You have no power over me. Oh, Merlin.
Always fun hanging out with the Durex dog.
Isn't that a condom brand?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I meant Dulux.
How many times have you mixed those two up?
Not sure, but it would explain how when I went into a chemist once to look for condoms, I came out with a tin of off-white Persian.
Your chemist sells paint and condoms?
Well, anyway, she lives with her dad and stepmom, and they leave her for the night where she has to look after her stepbrother, Toby, which she's none too happy about.
Lancelot! Someone has been in my room again! I hate that. Someone save me! Someone take me away from this awful place!
How old is she supposed to be?
Yeah, that is one of the problems with this movie. At the time this movie was made, Connelly would have been 16, but the script feels more like the role was intended for someone a lot younger, like between 8 or 12 or so. The fact that 16-year-old Connelly was chosen might have been a producer's decision to have a more recognisable star in there, but I have another theory as to why, which we'll get to later on. Anyway, she hates Toby, which, as someone who has a younger brother, I totally understand that.
What do you want? You want a story? Huh? Okay.
Oh, come on. Give the concept designer's son his teddy back.
No joke, Toby's played by Toby Froud, Brian Froud's son. Do you think they put this movie on every Christmas and go, look at you crying there, I had to pinch you so hard to get you to do that? And, inspired by the book she was reciting from earlier, wishes that the goblins would take him away. Unbeknownst to her, those goblins are in fact real, and hear her, and thus grant her wish.
Wherever you may be, take this child of mine far away from me! Toby? Are you alright?
So does that mean that fantasy books are based on fact? If that's the case, can I go live in the world from the Book of Erotic Fantasies? The Goblin King Jareth, played by Bowie, appears and tells her that his goblin minions have taken Toby to the castle, and if she wants him back, she'll have to come and get him, by going through the labyrinth that leads to it. And as everyone who has watched this movie can attest to, David Bowie is easily the best part of this movie.
I want my brother back, please, if it's all the same.
What's said is said.
But I didn't mean it.
Oh, you didn't. I've brought you a gift.
What is it?
It's a crystal. Nothing more.
His performance is so flowery and has an almost otherworldly feel to it that you genuinely believe he is some sort of mystical figure from another world. You are just entranced by every word he says, and it's amazing. Acting across from Connolly, who I can tell is trying her best, but it seems like she wasn't directed the best, since it comes across like she can't tell whether to take her dialogue seriously or not and just comes off as melodramatic.
Is that the castle beyond the Goblin City?
Stop, don't come back.
Bowie is in complete command of his character and every single scene he is in. Though there is one standout part of his character that most people remember, and we'll get to that when it pops out. I mean, up. So Jareth and his bunch of inbred podlings, also known as goblins, whisk Toby away, and Sarah now has to venture through the labyrinth.
The labyrinth. Doesn't look that hard.
Are we looking at the same thing right now? The intestines of the voles I eat are less complicated and gross looking than that.
But Sarah trudges on and comes across this. Well, thanks for having that be the first time we see a full-body puppet, Jim. This is Hoggle, the caretaker of the labyrinth, played and puppeteered by Brian Henson, Jim's son. The nepotism is strong with this movie.
Horrible.
Huh? No, I ain't. I'm Hoggle. Who are you?
Hoggle is a great example of the evolution of the technology in the puppetry from the Dark Crystal. If you remember that review, you'll remember that I said the Gelflings, while technically impressive, do look a bit weird and uncanny and didn't seem like they were alive. But the Skeksis and the Mystics did, and I think that came down to how they were made to look deliberately ugly, which gave their faces more detail and allowed them to be more expressive. Hoggle is also deliberately ugly, and while his lip sync isn't perfect, between this and the last thing we reviewed, it just makes me think the puppeteers think all we need to do to talk is just move our jaw up and down. He is very expressive and does feel real, and the grittiness of his design compensates for the lack of things his face can't do that normal human faces can, and it does help him gel with Sarah as a human. I can totally believe these two things can be together in the same place, even if he does look like a dwarf Keith Richards with syphilis, and the same goes for the rest of the puppets who have the same things going for them, in how they look ugly and expressive, not the syphilis thing. Though this does make me wonder why the unbelievably attractive Jareth is the king of the goblins. I know there's a backstory manga about that, but still, this seems weird. He doesn't look like other goblin kings like the ones from The Hobbit and Doctor Who.
Ooh, are they even hotter than him?
You thought you could escape me.
Kill them all with fire!
You think that looks scary? Check out what the Hoggle puppet turned into over time. Imagine finding that in a cupboard 25 years later. Well, back to the plot. Hoggle doesn't do much in this scene other than show Sarah the way into the labyrinth, which looks like Hampton Court Maze in winter, and comes across the inexplicably most popular character in the movie.
Come inside, meet the missus. Come inside and have a nice cup of tea.
Seriously, this little thing appears for only like 2 minutes and has become so popular. There's shirts, fan art, merchandise, all from this little scene. How did it get so popular?
Well, cute things with cute voices can get a lot of popularity, even from very short first appearances. Just look at me.
Touché. Anyway, from this point on, the movie is more or less a series of encounters Sarah has in the Labyrinth, while meeting some colourful travelling companions along the way. They've clearly taken inspiration from some of the children's fantasy classics like Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan here, which is nice to see a more modern story in this style, though this one lacks a vital ingredient: believability. Not to say that the effects and the sets don't look amazing, which they do, it's just that it's clear that we're looking at puppets and sets. We don't quite get lost enough in this world to make it feel like it's real. With Dark Crystal, for as awkward as some of the effects looked, you did feel like you were transported to another world. Here it just feels like I'm going through a fairground amusement. A very elaborate one, granted, but it just doesn't feel quite real. And I'll be fair, some adaptations of Peter Pan and Alice have had cheap looking productions, but they inject just the right amount of charm to make them enchanting. Here, most of the charm comes from the puppets, and while they are cool, they can only carry the movie so much, and when they have to fight Connolly's awkward acting, it does ruin the illusion, quite sadly. Though this doesn't ruin the movie, it just holds it back from being a true classic. But let's take a look at some more detail, shall we? And what a detail we're looking at next. This is probably the most famous part of the movie, the magic dance scene, where Jareth sings about how Toby will become like his goblins if Sarah can't find him.
I saw my baby crying hard as babe could cry. What could I do? Dance, magic dance. Dance, magic dance. Dance, magic dance.
You gonna shit all over this as well?
Not exactly, though I do have some problems with it.
Why am I not surprised?
I will admit that the song and the scene itself is a ton of fun, but there are two things that hold it back for me. One is, well, let's face it here, David Bowie was not that great of a singer.
Now you're in for it.
Just hear me out, okay? He was an amazing artist, don't get me wrong, but his skill lied in his performance ability, compositional skills, and creativity. His actual voice, well, it was very limited. He always sounded like he was coming round from an operation.
My baby's love had gone and left my baby blue. Nobody knew.
Is this real life?
He wasn't the worst singer ever, not at all, but it does show his limitation when I look at him and think, he sounds like me when I sing.
Care to prove that?
Gladly. The Gene Genie, he screams on your balls. The Gene Genie, let yourself go.
You just added a load of reverb to compensate for your voice.
Well, that's what he does too. The other issue I have is that the tempo of the song feels like it's very lethargic and not very rhythmic. The actual composition is great, but it sounds like it was slowed down a bit. I could be wrong there, but that's just how it feels to me.
What kind of magic spell to use? Slime and snails.
Like I said, this song and scene is brilliant, but much like the rest of the movie, it feels like it comes up short of what it truly could have been.
Well, there is one thing in this movie that truly measures up.
Oh, we'll get to that soon, trust me. Anyway, Sarah keeps making her way through the labyrinth, marking her way as she goes, though that doesn't work out quite so well. I am using that insult in the future. I'm adding it to my regular rotation alongside
Ash biscuits!
and
Twat hammer!
she then comes across this classic logic puzzle.
And I should warn you that one of us always tells the truth and one of us always lies.
I've seen this used so many times, but I think Rick and Morty showed the best way to get around it.
You ever fuck this guy's wife?
Yes. Well, how about that? He guessed right.
But sadly, she does not do that and falls into something called the oubliette, where she comes across Hoggle again.
This is an oubliette.
What the hell's an oubliette?
It's a place to put people to forget about them.
Oh, so it's an old folks' home.
She manages to convince Hoggle to help her out in exchange for a bracelet.
What eats that, anyway?
Plastic?
Ooh, the same material my eyes are made out of.
Why do you sound like Yoda when you say that?
Hoggle agrees to get her out, but along the way they bump into Jareth and his little friend.
Nothing. 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 Tra-la-la.
And there it is, the scepter of the Goblin King, clad in nylon.
Jesus, that thing steals the scene so much it should have gotten top billing.
All I'm thinking is if the carpet matches the drapes, because if it does, it's going to look like an elephant with a Motley Crue haircut.
Do you think the costume department pointed out they could see that and he just said, "And do you like it?"
We literally have hundreds of these. We could keep going all day.
Oh, can I do one more?
Go on.
Ground control to major wardrobe malfunction.
Okay, let's leave it there. Well, actually, I've got one more. When Hoggle does this...
No, Your Majesty, not the eternal stench.
Holy crap, is he gonna suck him off? Well, thankfully not, and Jareth, mad at Hoggle for helping her, and Sarah having made it this far, summons the cleaners to take them out. But they manage to get away and come across a new character.
Don't you want me to help you down?
Ludo, down.
Ludo? Is that your name?
Bit weird to be named after a board game, but there are worse ones to be named after.
I was thinking more about how that's the name of the studio that makes Bluey.
Huh, interesting. So this is the gentle giant Ludo, who looks like a cross between the honey monster and the Gruffalo, and sounds like him too. Joins up with Sarah, and after they get past Statler and Waldorf reincarnated as knockers...
Don't talk with your mouth full.
That's door knockers, by the way, though I could also see them as a pair of tits. Jareth meets up with Hoggle in private and asks him to give Sarah a poisoned peach. I would say Hoggle should stand up for himself, but he's probably mesmerised by the Goblin King's swinging pendulum there.
I've just noticed your lovely jewels are missing.
Whereas yours we can't stop looking at. But enough of plot points and innuendos, time for a pointless song sung by Crackhead Fraggles. Yeah, this literally ties into nothing. It's completely pointless. But damn it all if it isn't fun. Also, fun fact, one of these fire demons is voiced by Danny John Jules, aka the cat from Red Dwarf.
Some might say I'm a pretty shallow guy, but a shallow guy with a great ass.
Pity these puppets didn't pick up his dancing skills.
Agreed. But after leaving Burning Man, I mean, it involves fire, and I can imagine you would see stuff like this while on shrooms. They take a wrong turn and end up in the bog of eternal stench.
You're right.
Which is what my bathroom was called after you broke into my house years ago.
It was uncalled for getting that animal control guy in.
Oh. You shit all over my floor and tried to eat me!
My mother abandoned me that day.
I can see why. Speaking of obnoxious foxes, the gang come across one called Sir Didymus, who is basically if you cross Basil Brush with Reaper Cheap from Narnia.
Stop, I say!
Please, we have to get across.
Without my permission, no one may cross.
With a bit of Sebastian from Meet the Feebles thrown in there. And Sebastian did end up at the end of that movie with one eye, so maybe this is just another one of his new identities to escape the law after the events of that film.
Come on, let us get across.
Hold!
What a little asshole.
What do you expect? He's a fox.
You what, mate?
This is the part where it's revealed that Ludo can control rocks.
My brother! Canst thou summon up the very rocks?
Sure, Rock's friends.
Why? How? Never explained. Though, as I said in the Dark Crystal review, fantasy movies do tend to have random stuff like this happen in them. After they get out of the bog, they get hungry.
Maybe we can find some berries or something.
Well, if this is anything like Hampton Court Maze, you don't want to do that. Though Sarah does eat the poison peach, so it basically gives the same results. This then puts Sarah into a trance where Jareth mystically professes his love for her, and that was his true intention all along, are to get her to stay in his kingdom and be his bride.
But I'll be there for you as the world falls down.
And here's where the casting choice of Connolly in this role arguably was a stealth good idea in hindsight. Now, the idea of a seemingly ageless fantasy being wanting a young girl to be his bride isn't an inherently creepy idea. I could see that working in a fantasy book where the fairy tale tone allows you to look past the age issues, like how in Snow White, how the prince's necrophilia kiss brought Snow White back to life. Hell, I've even seen 1 or 2 porn versions of the story where the prince shags Snow White's dead body and that brings her back to life.
Ugh, you watch some really fucked up porn.
You do not know the half of it. But, like I said, the fact that the movie doesn't quite fully capture that fairy tale tone does make you think, hang on, how old is Sarah? And Jareth wants her to be his bride? So having 16-year-old Connolly play Sarah does make it a little less icky than if she was like a 10-year-old, which is what I think the creators originally intended. I mean, it is still a little icky, but given how beloved Jareth is towards lady fans of this movie, I think a lot of people are able to see past it. But moving past that creepy bit, Sarah breaks herself out of the trance, twice. Yeah, this movie goes all Inception for a little bit there. And finally makes it to the Goblin City, though they don't get the warmest welcome.
Wow, it's like Podling Evangelion.
Yeah, it is.
You've never seen Evangelion, have you?
No, I haven't.
And yet you did a whole month about anime last year.
I never claimed to be an expert, but the gang gets past the medieval Voltron, and Ludo helps them out with his rock buddies again, in the set that I think was repurposed for the town set in Muppet Christmas Carol, and also managed to squash a chicken in the process. Spatchcock chicken, anyone? And finally, Sarah enters the palace and confronts Jareth.
That's the only way it could have gone.
Well then, come on.
No. I have to face him alone.
But why?
Because it'll be harder for all the female viewers to get off to this scene if you guys are standing near me. So Sarah enters into the amazing looking MC Escher inspired room, one of the few parts of the movie where you do feel like you're transported to another realm, and faces Jareth one last time in his sexiest outfit yet.
Everything I've done for you. I move the stars for no one.
Even I'm getting a bit wet looking at him in all that leather. Apparently for that effect, they pretty much just put Bowie in a harness and said, okay David, just don't die.
Sounds like what they said to me when I was born.
Also, I'll admit that Bowie's singing is probably at its best in this scene. Something about him having to convey pain and emotion through his singing makes him sound a lot more melodious and just a little bit nicer than usual.
Your eyes can be so cruel. Love without your heartbeat.
But yeah, it looks like we're working up to the big climax. Here we go.
Just fear me, love me, do as I say, and I will be your slave.
Now that's a paradox and you know it.
Or the vows that Sean Penn gave at his wedding to Madonna.
You have no power over me.
Wait, that's it? All that she went through and all you had to do was say no to his balls.
To be fair, that'll defeat most men.
That's true. So, yeah, that's a bit disappointing after all the stuff we've seen him do and the thought of him going all out in the climax, and he's basically just taken out like Freddy in the first Nightmare film. Though I will admit, I do like how it's a mind game that finally does him in at the end. So Sarah and Toby are returned home, with Sarah showing that she likes Toby now, but still wishing that she could see her friends in the fantasy world.
I need you, Hoggle.
You do? Well, why didn't you say so?
And at that point her parents break in, see her having a party with no one, and commit her to an insane asylum. The end. So, that was Labyrinth. Was it good, and how does it compare to Dark Crystal? Well, I feel like Dark Crystal and this movie both have flaws that hold it back from being a true classic, but in completely different ways from each other. In Dark Crystal, the story and the characters were what held the movie back. But that's not a problem here. The story is very well paced and has good moments, and while a bit fragmented, it is interesting in all the right ways. And while the acting from Connolly isn't as good as it could be, Sarah is still an enjoyable protagonist, and the other characters are a lot of fun too. I especially like Hoggle. He shows a big gambit of emotions and shows more complexity than you'd ever expect in a movie like this. The big problem comes with, like I said, it's not quite feeling like it's trying to immerse you like Dark Crystal did. The one thing that Dark Crystal pulled off flawlessly, here it just doesn't quite carry it off. The pieces were there between the two to make a perfect fantasy movie, but they just didn't quite come together. There's also how Dark Crystal definitely felt like the brainchild of one man. This does have the animal design by committee problem where it feels like multiple people trying to have their say. And I can understand why that was the case given how Dark Crystal underperformed. They would want to make sure that this movie would do better, which ironically, this movie made back even less than Dark Crystal did under the same budget, which is probably why the Jim Henson Company didn't try making any more movies like this in the future. And all these different elements just didn't quite gel well. It does make this movie a bit of a mess, but like Dark Crystal, it's a fun mess, and the parts that work are great, particularly Bowie, who is a ton of fun. And the one thing it does have in common with Dark Crystal is that the puppetry and the effects are incredibly impressive, as they always are. And while I did voice my issue with Magic Dance, it's still a great song, and all the other songs are really fun too, even if they're not as catchy and memorable. I can see why this has become a cult classic, and why it's more remembered than Dark Crystal, since there are a lot more things that stand out about this movie.
But surely now it's time to talk about the Dark Crystal TV series?
No. Can't do too much of the same thing so close together. So, I've had enough of this, so...
Enough of this! I've kept quiet for too long, and now it's time to let my true voice be heard.
Okay, it's time I got what I want. So now, next month, we're gonna do Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. We're doing this, or I stop working on the show. Understand?
Okay then, I guess we're doing that. People wanted it to happen so much the fourth wall was broken. So, yeah, tune into when we do that, I suppose. But for now, I've had enough of this. I'm going on the other side to have a bath. Bye.
Dance, magic, dance, magic, dance, magic, dance, magic, dance. Put that baby spell on me.
I feel.
Jump, magic, jump, magic, jump, magic, jump, magic, jump. Put that magic jump on me.
Slap that baby, make him free.